Hi everyone, it's Mrs. Bebo. In this video, we're going to continue talking about solving proportions, and we're going to specifically look at story problems that are involving that type of equation. So let's get started. In this first example, we're going to solve a proportion by using a constant rate. So this problem is telling us that parts of Mexico City are sinking at a rate of 140 centimeters every 5 years. If this rate remains constant, how many centimeters will the city sink in the next 12 years? So because we're using a constant rate, we're going to set up these two ratios equal to each other. So essentially, how much the city is sinking. So the fact that it's sinking the 140 centimeters in 5 years, we're going to set that equal to, again, since it's constant, the amount that the city sinks, again, we're not sure, right? X number of centimeters in 12 years. So when we set up my proportion here, we kept it very consistent, right? How much the city is sinking in 5 years, this mystery amount in 12 years, right? And if we go through and just remove all of our labels, now we can clearly see we have 140 over 5 equals X over 12. And now we're just going to solve this proportion. So we're going to use cross products to go through and start solving this. So we're going to have 12 times 140, the 5 times the X. So 5 times X is just going to be 5X. The 12 times the 140 is going to be 1,680. And then our last step here is to divide both sides by 5. And we get X equals 336. And then we can add our label of centimeters. So in the next 12 years, the city is predicted to sink 336 centimeters. And then that's it for that question. So we're going to try this again with another one where we're going to set up, again, this proportion that has this consistent ratio throughout. So in this one, Oscar's making fruit punch to sell from his food truck by mixing 8 parts cranberry juice to 3 parts pineapple juice. How many cups of pineapple juice would Oscar need to mix with 48 cups of cranberry juice to make his punch? So we have this initial ratio here, 8 parts cranberry juice to 3 parts pineapple juice. When I am writing out my ratio, it's the 8 parts of, I'm going to just abbreviate cranberry juice with CJ over, and then the 3 parts of pineapple juice, which I'll just abbreviate PJ, right? So we have 8 to 3. This is going to equal, again, if we keep this consistent, well, how many parts of cranberry juice to however many parts of pineapple juice? Well, in this problem, it tells us that we are going to be mixing it with 48 cups of cranberry juice. So 48 is going to go on the top here. So this is the 48 cups of cranberry juice to, again, this mystery number of cups for the pineapple juice. And now that we have our numbers in the right spots, we can clean this up by just removing all of our labels. So I'm going to rewrite it as just 8 over 3 equals this 48 over X. And now we do our cross products. Again, there is another method of solving this. We could just use equivalent ratios, but just to keep it consistent, we're going to do cross products so we can remind ourselves how that works. So 8 times X is going to be 8X. We have 48 times 3, which is going to be 144. And then our last step is to go through and divide both sides by 8. And then that gets us our final answer of X equals 18. And then our label would be cups. And then that's it for that question. In those problems, we had this consistent or a constant rate. We also can see proportion problems that involve percentages. So that's what we're going to take a look at in these next 2 examples. So on this first one, it says we're going to solve a percent problem by using a proportion. A guide company makes a trail mix of raisins and mixed nuts. How many pounds of raisins does the guide company need to mix with 14 pounds of mixed nuts to make the trail mix 30% raisins? You have a couple of options on how to set this one up. And I'm going to go through 2 of the options that we could use, and then you can decide which method works best for you, because again, our brains all work differently. So sometimes we might be thinking of how to set up a problem different than somebody else. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's wrong. For this first way of setting up the question, we're going to say, okay, let's let R equal the number of pounds of raisins, right? Because we're trying to find out how many pounds of raisins. So we'll just put number of pounds of raisins. The total trail mix, right, is then going to be, so total trail mix amount is going to equal the amount of the raisins plus the 14 pounds of mixed nuts. So we have 2 expressions here that we're going to want to focus on when we go through this first method. R and then this R plus 14. So when I set up my proportion now, we're going to be looking at raisins, so the amount of raisins and the amount of trail mix, right? There's a ratio of the raisins to the total trail mix. And the amount of raisins, in this case, is 30%. The trail mix is our 100%, right? So 30% raisins, the whole thing, right? All of it would be considered the 100% amount. When I plug in my expressions that I just came up with that I have highlighted here, right? The amount of raisins is R. My trail mix total is the raisins plus the 14 pounds of mixed nuts. And this equals, again, 30 over 100. So then we would go through and solve this, right? We would use our cross products. R times 100, 30 times this entire quantity of R plus 14. So we'd have 100R equals 30 multiplied by this R plus 14. If we distribute that 30 to everything inside the parentheses, we're going to have 100R equals 30R plus 420. And we would subtract the 30R from both sides. We'd end up with 70R equals 420. Last step, divide by 70 to find that our answer for the amount of raisins is going to be 6 pounds. Okay, so that's one way we could set this up. Whatever percentage amount to the total amount, but we have to be careful because then we have to set up this expression that represents the total amount, in this case that R plus 14, because again, it's the amount of raisins plus the 14 pounds of mixed nuts. So that's one option for this. We also could set this up taking a look at the amount of raisins to that amount of mixed nuts. So if we take a look at the amount of raisins, so if I write this out, so raisins to, again, the mixed nuts, the amount of raisins, right, that is composing this trail mix is 30%. The amount of mixed nuts then would be 70%, right? Because 100% is the total trail mix. 100 minus 30 leaves me with 70% of that trail mix being this mixed nuts. So now when I plug in my numbers here, we're going to have R over, well, the amount of mixed nuts we actually know, that's 14 pounds. And then that equals 30 over 70. And now we can do our cross products and solve this. And we're going to find that even if we set this up slightly different from the other one, because the math is still equivalent to the initial situation, right? We're still dealing with the 30%. We're still taking into consideration the 70% or the 100%. The math is still going to work out to be the same exact answer. We're going to have 70R equals, again, after we do the cross products here, so 70R equals 420, and then dividing both sides by 70, we end up with R equals 6. And again, our label is pounds. So we could set it up both of those ways and end up with the same exact answer. It's just, again, whatever works best for your brain on how to set this up and then go through and solve. I know a lot of my students are going to probably set up these similar types of questions with the one on the right, the same kind of method, but the one on the left is equally as good. We're going to take a look at one more problem in this video, same kind of idea, except for we're going to give some options and we are going to decide which of these is going to be the best way of setting this up. So it says Aida is making a plant food mixture to use in her garden. The mixture to be 20% plant food and 80% water. She needs to make 12 gallons of the mixture to cover her entire garden. Which proportions can be used to find the amount of plant food P that she will need? So when we go through and think through this question, before we even look at all of our options here, we can take into consideration the fact that we're dealing with 20% plant food, 80% water. We need to make 12 gallons of the mixture, right? And so I'm going to take a look at maybe this plant food amount over this mixture amount, right? And the plant food in this case is 20% and the mixture amount is 100%. This does tell us we're going to use P for plant food. So we don't know the amount of the plant food. We know that the mixture is 12 gallons. And then again, we have that 20 over 100. So we should see that there is a proportion that's going to match this situation up in our options here. And it actually ends up matching with option B, right? So option B is the same thing. So 20 over 100 equals P over 12. So the plant food over the mixture equals 20% over 100%. That's one option of how we could set this up. The other way that we could think of this is the amount of water to the entire mixture. So if we take a look at that option, so water over the mixture, the water now is 80%. of the entire mixture, right? Which again, we'll use 100% to represent that because again, that's the entire piece, right? 100%, that is it. So the mixture is 100%, the water is 80% of that 100%. The water, we don't know that amount, but we can represent it by taking the entire mixture amount, subtracting the amount of plant food, and whatever is left would be the amount of water in this mixture, which the mixture itself is 12 gallons. And then that would be equal to 80 over 100. So we're going to see an option here that matches. So this is going to match with letter D. Now, an option that's not shown on here, because right now they're saying only B and D are the only ways of setting this up, but we actually have a third option of setting up this problem to then go through and solve. And we could set this one up. If I get a different color so we can make it clear on the screen here, we could do plant food to the amount of water in this mixture, right? And we know that the plant food is 20% of the mixture, while the water is 80% of the mixture. Plant food, we're using P4. The amount of water would be, again, that 12 gallons minus the amount of plant food. Whatever's left is the amount of water, and then that equals the 20 over 80. So that's another option as well. So we actually had 3 options of how we could go through and set up and solve this problem. Now in this problem, that was all that we needed to do, right? We just had to figure out which of the proportions could be used to find. The main purpose of this question was just to get us figuring out how to set up these types of percent problems. So hopefully it helps now that we've seen that there's 3 ways to set up this one problem. The last question, we set up 2 different ways to solve. And if we were to go through and solve this problem, again, doesn't matter which one I pick, all of them are going to turn out to be the same exact answer. We would use our cross products and then go through our steps for solving equations. We would end up finding that the answer is 2 4/10 gallons. So in case you go through and try it on your own, that is the amount of plant food that ends up being inside of this plant food mixture. So that is it for this video. Thank you again for watching.